Hi, everybody. Welcome to. I don't have a name for this series, so it's just welcome to us here live. I am Tony. I am the outreach coordinator at AMI-Quebec. And before I let these two introduce themselves, we're going to be talking about men's mental health. So if you have any questions you'd like to ask, you can ask them in the comments. We're here to answer them live. Yeah. So before we get started, I'll have these guys introduce themselves. So let's start with whoever I'm pointing to. Vincent, you start first. I never know which direction I'm pointing, so
Hi everyone,
go
my name
ahead.
is Vincent. I'm a psychiatry resident at McGill University. So that means I did my medical studies and now I'm training to be specialized in psychiatry. And so as part of my work and training, I am sometimes in the emergency rooms, sometimes on the hospital wards, and sometimes doing follow-up in the clinic. So I work with all kinds of populations, including, of course, men.
Okay, awesome. Hi, David, who just said hello, and then hi, Cedric. Thanks for joining us at 2 in the morning. That's awesome. From the Philippines. We appreciate you joining us. So, Colin, who are you, and what are you bringing to the table?
Hi, my name's Khan. I am a local clinical counselor, running my own private practice. I have about just under a decade's worth of experience as a local high school guidance counselor as well. I currently teach part-time as a psychology instructor at the SAGEP level as well. I work as a consultant in the area of EDI, EDIA, and I'm also develop content in terms of workshops, facilitated discussions, and trainings.
All right. So, for those who don't know, what is EDI and EDIA?
So EDI is equity, diversity, and inclusion.
Okay.
And then EDIA is the exact same thing, but
Okay.
accessibility added.
Accessibility. Okay. Awesome. That's good to know because I am familiar with that acronym, but I know a lot of people are not. So it's good to know. So
Acronyms are always evolving.
yeah,
I
they're
feel
like
like they change.
it's always changing. For those of you who are tuning in for the first time, my name's Tony. I am the outreach coordinator at AMI Quebec. In terms of for this discussion, I am bringing to the table. I am a man, so I think I qualify for this discussion. But also, I'm a father. I have worked with youth and intervention work for many years, and I've worked in the community sector for almost 2 decades now. So I have a lot of lived experience and professional experience in this area. So I'm excited to actually really talk about this and to get into it. Before we get started, I just want to remind people again that if you're watching live, ask questions in the comments, put them in the comments, and we can answer them. Really, like, we're here to talk, and if you don't ask questions, I'm going to keep this discussion going. So before we really go here, I'm going to ask you guys a question. If you could be any winged animal, what would it be and why? Winged. It has to have wings. Yep. Vincent, you're up. You're going first.
Well, okay, there's a fictional
Hey,
animal type. I think I would
it's
like to be a
all
dragon.
you, a dragon. All right. Why, though?
Yeah, dragons are amazing.
All right.
Well, all the movies that have dragons, they're just my favorites.
All right. That's a good enough reason. Perfect. So David approves. Khan, you're up. What do you?
That's
What?
odd. I actually went with mythical characters as
Did
well,
you
and I was
really?
caught up. I was caught up between a griffin and Pegasus.
Okay.
Um, I think I'm gonna lead more towards Pegasus just because of like Greek myth and a couple like cartoons and stuff that I love that had that in there. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with Pegasus.
All right. Because I don't follow rules ever, I'm going to go with a flying fish because they don't necessarily have wings. But if you've ever been out on a boat in the ocean and you come across a school of flying fish, they're just like, they just cruise and like right next to your boat. And like you catch them and they're useless to eat, but like, or to like do anything with. But they're really awesome. And like occasionally they just like misguide and then just fly right into your boat. And I think that's just like, I think you get the best of both. You can fly, but also just be hanging out underwater. So that's my. They don't have wings, but they do. Their fins are. They fly more than other fish. So there's
Yeah.
my. That's my answer. Um, so we're going to talk about men's mental health. There's like all kinds of different things we can talk about. And the first thing I want to bring up is, so in this discussion, we make Facebook events for this. Both of our events were made at the same time. Because Diana, who is our fantastic person in charge of Facebook and events and all of that stuff, she made the events. And so right now, if you look at the two events, there's 28 people who are interested in the women's mental health, which is next month, and there were only 8 people interested in the men's mental health. So maybe we can just start our discussion with that. Why, like, what do you think is going on there? Like, what do you think is the, like, I don't know, what are your opinions about that? What do you think is like the guiding, like the underlying force behind these, like, lack of interest in the men's mental health compared to the interest in women's mental health? Let's start with you, Vincent. You've been going first, so you're going to keep going first. I'll switch it up in a minute.
So I think there's no unique answer to that question.
Okay.
One thing that's probably very important is that men's mental health has always been less talked about, and
Okay.
that's not just something of nowadays. It's been part of our cultures for a long time.
Yeah.
And there's different ways of framing this, but it's part of the sort of associations that we make with each gender. So we associate certain characteristics as feminine, and
Okay.
we label others as masculine.
Yep.
And that's like something that is part of our cultures. And so within the so-called masculine qualities, talking about emotions, or introspection, or just talking, are
Yeah.
not exactly things that we associate to masculinity.
Yeah.
And even though we've made a lot of progress in kind of challenging these stereotypes, it's still part of our subconscious, and that's probably a factor that explains, I think, why men don't talk as much about mental health.
Okay. That's a great insight there. Con, what do you think about this?
I think Vincent stole most of the.
It's hard.
No, actually, you know what? I'm gonna piggyback off of what Vincent said. So, I definitely think that one of the major reasons is when you look at gender roles and socialization in society. I think the reason why you see less men is, I don't feel that oftentimes men have the freedom or the privilege to be emotional, or to be vulnerable. And so I think with that, what happens is I kind of treat it like a skill. And so if you don't have the time to gain experience, to exposure, to work on it,
Yeah.
it becomes underdeveloped. And I think that for a lot of men, for different reasons, we don't have the freedom or the privilege to be vulnerable, to be emotional, which then allows us to develop a deeper understanding of just like EQ, so emotional
Yeah.
intelligence as a whole, and then an understanding of our emotional makeup.
Okay.
So I think that plays a large part into it. I think it's not modeled in society as well.
Yeah.
So you don't see examples of men doing this or engaging it or maybe not talking about it. And I think because of that, then like you look at like images of masculinity as well, men need to be kind of like this pillar of strength, which means that you can't have emotions or you manage everything on your own, like you don't need help. And I think that everything that we would kind of socialize, or these messages of what it is to be a man, even though they're changing, still kind of hold true. And because of that, it's not conducive to men going or moving towards mental health services or therapy. And then it's also, I think it can be really difficult if that's something that's underdeveloped, like to put yourself in that emotional state can be really overwhelming.
Yeah. Yeah. David is giving just like kind of just acknowledging what you're saying here. He's saying he certainly felt that his emotional response is only okay when that emotional response is utilitarian to the person expecting it. So both of you kind of talked about how men aren't typically given the space, or I guess they're not allowed to talk about their emotions. What can we do to like change that? What can we do as like, well, as men, but also as like a society, right? Like sometimes on a personal level, but also as like on a whole level. So it's kind of like a two-part question there. Con, you can go first this time.
Sure. I think it has to be normalized.
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of things that oftentimes are explained and rationally we can understand it, but it doesn't mean that emotionally or personally we connect to it,
Yeah.
and therefore we don't internalize it. So, right, like think about all the messages, all the conversations, events, talks that we have about things that are really important, but they just kind of like we can make sense of it,
Yeah.
but then it just washes over us or passes through. But I think when you see it being modeled, when you see it being normalized, when you see it being regular, when there's people that you can identify with
Yeah.
who are doing so, I think there's a lot of power in that. And so I think it's on every level. I think in media, it's important that you see men talking about it, or men in roles in TV shows and movies
Yeah.
who are demonstrating using mental health services, being vulnerable, this kind of nice balance between that, but still being a man, so to speak, or being masculine,
Yeah.
and that there's room for that. I think that's something that is really, really important in terms of what we can do. And then all the way to like at home in terms of whether it's siblings or parents or family that also kind of model and encourage us to make um, emotional space,
Yeah.
if you will.
Yeah. So, Vincent, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think I agree with what you said, Con, and you've mentioned families. I think we have a responsibility towards the children to model that, and whether as parents or teachers or just people that are in the lives of the new generation, we can certainly challenge these ideas that men shouldn't speak about their emotions or that they shouldn't have mental health problems. And I would say also for adults, I think so. Well, first we should recognize that people are very different. So we can be general and say that men don't like to talk about their emotions, but of course there's a lot of diversity. But I think it's also important to acknowledge that some people are not that comfortable talking about their emotions.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And for example, as a clinician, I can try to encourage people to open up and to talk. And that's certainly helpful to identify what are their needs, how can I help them. But also, I acknowledge that sometimes talking is not what is going to feel right for this person at this particular moment. And and so I think it's also helpful to look within what makes sense for the person, and that can include things like sports or singing in the choir at the church. That can include arts, hunting, for some people. So there are different ways that we can have that space for introspection and to internalize and digest some of the things that we're going through.
It's funny. It's funny that you say that because the thing about having activities where people can like men can get together and like talk and do that and just the other day I was talking about this topic. It was probably about a month ago. I was talking about this topic with a group of like a mixed company, right? So it was like men and women all together, and I am like I like working on motorcycles. I like working on cars. This is like something that I've only learned to do in the past 5 or 6 years, and it's not something that I grew up doing ever. However, in the time that I've learned to do it, I've noticed that whenever I have other men working on a car with me, the conversations go so much deeper than they would if we were just like sitting around on a couch or something like that. Like we talk about so many different things about how we're feeling, what's going on in our lives, and just like having that distraction to keep us from not paying attention to each other, because that's the awkward part, right? Is like I'm not going to look you in the eye and talk to you. Like it's uncomfortable for many reasons, but it allows us to like to just open up in ways that just wouldn't have happened otherwise. And I've always thought like it's funny. I was like, oh, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to open up a private practice where we're going to do oil changes and therapy at the same time, and you get to pay for the therapy and you get a free oil change with it, and you're going to do it all at once. And then it would get in kind of a way to like get the guys who probably would never talk about their emotions to talk about it, right? To just be like, okay, well, I have to, because that's the agreement that I signed. I'm going to do an oil change, but I have to talk about stuff. Like, I just thought that was like it would be like a funny way of like, kind of like not tricking men, but like to just like encouraging us to like, talk to each other. You both mentioned youth. So how and like families, I think. And so how can fathers better help their kids when it comes to, and let's talk about young men right now rather than just the generalized, because I think that the approach, anyways, rewind here for a second. Let's just talk about men and in terms of like fathers and their sons. What kind of things can fathers do? You kind of talked about this about in a broader scheme, but like what kind of things can fathers do to help model healthy coping mechanisms or just like ways of talking or dealing with mental health issues? Vincent, you're first. Con went first, so now you're up. I keep it's backwards.
Okay. Yeah. Um, so I think one thing that's very important is to be attentive to the child or the young man's um, emotions
Yeah.
or expressions of emotions, and be attentive to how we respond to that. So, for example, if we see a child or an adolescent crying because they're sad or because they are scared, our response is going to be important because it's going to teach that child something about the emotion. So we can say, no, you're not supposed to cry, and shake it up, and then the child is gonna learn, I shouldn't cry, or I shouldn't feel sad, or it's not okay to be sad. So it's very important, and it happens on one day, but it's also a repetition uh, as children develop. And so it's all about validating and
Okay.
saying, yes, it's normal. I understand why you feel this way. Um, it's been a difficult day at school. I understand that you're tired or feeling sad or frustrated. Let's see what we can do now. So it's validating and then teaching the child how to manage the emotions in a positive or healthy way.
Okay. Con, what do you think about this?
Um, I agree, and I think that um, I think it's like there's little things that I think can go a long way, right? And
Yeah.
so I think it's also which roles parents occupy, right? Have both parents be interested in regularly check in on how someone's day was, where maybe
Mhm.
some of the emotional content might be. Have both parents be willing and regularly ask how somebody's feeling and
Mhm.
making space for that as well. I think it's also um, including emotion in your dialogue,
Mhm.
whether it's how you describe and talk about yourself or your own experiences, the type of questions or dialogue that you have with your kids or um, your boys, if you will, or dialogue even with your partner. I think everything is absorbed and picked up by children or young individuals, and so I think by showing that that is something that is normative for you to speak about,
Yeah.
that it is important because you're making space for it. That it is a regular part of your dialogue. I think that also models a certain safety in that being a part of the identity of your child, because they are going to model themselves off of their parents, at least to begin with, as they kind of go through and navigate. And so I think that's important, right? Like, there's a big difference between a parent who's just like, how was your day, like, and maybe at surface level, and versus a parent that goes in and is like, how's your day, how did that make you
Yeah.
feel, like, were you nervous about that presentation, right? Like, it opens up this space for that, for it teaches an emotional vocabulary as well,
Yeah.
so that people are better able to express and appropriately label their experiences and their emotions. So there's a certain freedom that also comes with that ability to externalize or get support if you learn how to talk about it and describe it. If you model not running away from it,
Yeah.
or so, right? And I think that's what's important too. Like, even at times when it's heated between you and your partner, right?
Yeah.
If you're just like, and I walk away, you might show that that's the appropriate thing to do
Yeah.
when things become overwhelming, right? There's a time to kind of give yourself a space back, but if that seems to be the end all be all of it,
Yeah.
or this is too much for me right now, and you shut it down,
Yeah.
there's also little things that you're communicating to your children as well that they're going to pick up on,
Yeah.
or they're going to model the way they relate to other people in relationships, friendships, romantic relationships,
Yeah.
because that's what they see.
So you bring up I think you bring up a good scenario in that, in talking about relationships, and I think that as a whole, men just aren't talking. They're not doing the emotional side of relationships comparatively to women in relationships, right? And so, what? I mean, you did talk about this, but I don't really know if there is anything to say. Maybe you guys can just give me your opinions about this. Is like, what can men do to take on more of that baggage in terms of emotional labor in relationships, right? In the sense that, like, Kanye gave a great example of, all right, well, this is too much, I'm shutting it down, I'm walking away. And, like, not doing that is obviously hard, but also necessary, of, like, working through these difficult emotions and talking things out and not just saying, you deal with that, I'm done. Like, do you have any insight or opinions about this? I don't really know if I have a question there.
I have some ideas.
Yeah. Okay.
I think for a lot of times it's about men being able to make space
Yeah.
to have room to take on baggage or someone else. Because I think part of it is a lot of men, I feel that because being vulnerable or emotional is synonymous with sometimes being unmasculine or feminine, synonymous with being, so many men are just like, I don't want to come off like this, or some form of weakness or whatnot. And I think so part of it is it's how you identify with yourself. And I think you got to really look at yourself in terms of how do you make room for that. If your regular way of dealing with emotional situations is to dismiss, to suppress, to put it behind you, to bottle it up and like carry on, you're not going to have you're not going to have room for someone else's emotional baggage. Yeah. It's like walking around with a full coffee mug, one little drop and it causes a spill, right? And that one little drop can be your partner appropriately coming to you to share with something. Yeah. I think it's also that if you don't develop that skill, a lot of times I'm going to stereotype a little bit and generalize. A lot of times men feel like when we're talking about issues, it's a default problem-solving mode. Yeah. Tell me something, try and find a solution, that's it. A lot of times what's important, as well as in therapy, it's about if somebody's down in the trenches or in a hole, it's not about immediately putting your arm out and pulling them out. Oftentimes it's about putting a ladder and going down and sitting in the trenches with somebody. Yeah. And then when you show that you can sit with them, then they're ready to come out of that hole. But you yourself have to be in a state and an ability to kind of sit there without feeling like it's overwhelming or you're drowning in it. Yeah. So I think for men, what's really important is that you have to be able to you have to have the bandwidth or the room to be able to take that on, because it is what comes with a relationship or in parenting, right? Yeah. And I think that for a lot of men, it's how do you develop that skill so it's not so triggering or overwhelming and it's more familiar? How do you develop an identity that doesn't see it as something that's so against you or your masculinity or who you are? And how do you have regular outlets so that way you're not walking around with a full mug, where maybe sometimes you actually cannot take on anymore, but then you're negating or invalidating your partner or your children. Sorry, I know that was a lot more.
No, I think it's great. Sorry, my dog came in and opened the door. So Vincent, do you have anything to add to this, like, what concept? He had a lot of really good insight, and there's a couple comments that kind of give some things, and then we can keep going with this conversation. This is a really good track here. Vincent.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I really like what you said, Con. One thing I would say is to try to involve the other people, whether it's your partner or your relative, the person who is close to you and whom you trust. You can involve them and say, look, when I'm feeling angry or upset or sad, it looks like I react this way, and I'd like you to help me with that. Yeah. And sometimes just sort of disclosing, not necessarily the emotions at first, but saying, like, this is the behavior that I want to change, and please can you help me with that? And then you can benefit also from that external perspective. And sometimes people can, in a couple, for example, if the man leaves the room in the middle of a conflict, it can be upsetting for the partner. Yeah. But then if the man comes back and say, I've noticed that maybe it happened 2 days ago, and I've been thinking about it, and I wish I had handled that differently. But for some reason, and I don't really understand, but it was too difficult for me.
Yeah.
And just that disclosure can help the other person understand, and then it mobilizes their help
Yeah.
in trying to change the behavior and how the emotions are handled.
I think you bring up a really good point, and that's like owning up to our own shortcomings, right? And just being like, I'm not good at this. I realize that I did this. How can I do this? However, I think that there's an important thing to, to distinguish is that it's not our partner's responsibilities to help us overcome that. Like
Yeah,
it's not their job to make sure that we're more emotionally mature. They can help us as partners because they want us to like thrive and they love us, but that's
absolutely.
at the same time you don't want to put that baggage on your partner, right? You're making them do the
Absolutely.
work for you, right? And that's I
Yeah,
think
that's
that
right.
that's a very important distinguishing point is that we we need to do the work ourselves before we can expect other people to do it for us, right? Like it's like, all right, I messed up, and it's like instead of just being like going to your partner and saying, all right, I messed up, I don't, how can I not do this again? Try to look into it yourself, and try to come up with some solutions that you can say, I messed up. This is what I think I can do to make it better. What do you think, right? And like show that you've done this work to like try to overcome these shortcomings that you had, and not just being like, well, that's not my problem. That's your problem to help me fix that. Um,
I
and
would add though that
yeah,
if I'm being fair and I want to be accusatory,
yeah,
but it's not our partner's role to be the change agent,
yeah,
but I think it is, and on both ends and in both ways, it is our partner's role or responsibility to support or
absolutely.
facilitate or to make it safe. And a
Yeah,
lot of times I know through my work or just personally that sometimes like men get checked for stepping outside of that rigid form of masculinity by both sides.
yeah,
It's not just there's like this global expectation as well that can occur of how men are supposed to be.
yeah,
And I've worked with a lot of men who've actually wanted more of a safe space to be able to do that,
yeah,
but their partners don't, that's not what
yeah,
they're expecting, that's
yeah,
not the standard that they put for them, and then it becomes very limiting
yeah,
or sometimes suffocating. And I just think that in being fair, that also has to be acknowledged,
yeah,
right? Like as
absolutely.
much as like there's the desire, there also it also has to feel that there's a safe climate
Yeah.
in order for you to kind of express and be that way.
Yeah, I think so. There's two comments here that kind of address this a little bit. There are many cultures, and I think it's across the board. I don't know if it's like a cultural thing where they're that still adhere to strict rules or perceptions on masculinity or femininity, and boys are often beaten or hurt by their fathers for showing feminine reactions like crying or showing their vulnerable side. Um, I think that can kind of apply to a lot of different cultures, not just like other cultures, and I think that's an important distinction to make. But then this is kind of, I think, addressing what you're saying, Con, is that it's not overt as beating. You can accumulate stigma that people hold against you, in the sense that someone can say, well, you're not supposed to be asking these questions. You're not supposed to be vulnerable. So why I'm not helping you.
Like I can share like
Yeah, please.
just like as a personal story, like for me, in many ways, it's funny. I laugh about this with like friends and family and so, but in many ways, there's no actual like there's very little reason why I should be doing the work that I do. Like
Yeah,
I've always been a more emotional or sensitive guy relatively.
yeah.
There was never any space for that, right?
Okay.
Like I went to an all guy school. Like
Yeah.
there was no, I got
No.
checked all the time,
Yeah.
and fortunately, I decided not to just dismiss it or lose it. Like
Yeah.
I had enough strength in my character to hold on to that, but it's not easy. And then it's double for me as well because in terms of the comment that was made, I think it was Cedric talking about certain cultures.
Yeah.
Like I'll be the first to admit, and it's well known. Like black male culture is does have a strong
Yeah.
degree of toxic or rigid masculinity. This antiquated, like traditional sense of what a man to be in, it is not very free in terms of
Yeah.
how you can express that. It is evolving and it's changing and it's really nice to see, but I definitely understand as well that like culturally, to make space to be more vulnerable, to address mental health or those needs, or a space for emotionality. Oftentimes, like, not just like relationships, but culturally, like how that is addressed, or you're treated based on that, can make it really, really difficult to feel that it's okay, because you might feel like you're going against your own people or your own identity
Yeah.
by doing so. And then it just adds like a greater kind of storm that person is going through.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting because like I'm Cuban. All of my family is like Latino, and they are 100% the most machismo man you have ever met in your entire life. Like it's like, I mean, anyways, I all the stereotypes you can think of, those are my cousins, those are my uncles, those are like that's all the male figures in my family. And so like no, there's definitely I didn't grow up with like a space to like talk about emotions. Like what are you talking? Even I mean, even in my mother's side, it was just like, okay, cool, you want to be sad, go over there. Like don't be sad over here. Like this is like, you know, and she was still like, she would comfort me, and she was like supportive, but at the same time it's like, okay, well, you got to figure that out and work through it, and not I still to this day don't have like the language around emotions and stuff like that I probably would have had if I had been better supported as a younger
It's also a privilege. Like, I know for me, like, I'm the product of a single parent household. So my mom raised myself and my brother, and what I've noticed and explained to people is that we didn't have the privilege of having, like, right, like, I barely saw my mom growing up because she was working multiple jobs. We didn't have the privilege for that. Like, we didn't have the time or the space for that. It was like focus on school, good behavior,
Yeah.
avoid harassment or getting in trouble with the police, right? Like, as a black male, like the dialogue, the conversation, the dynamic was very more authoritarian, but not like as a criticism to my mom. Like, oftentimes there just wasn't the time or the space. It really is a privilege to be able to sit down and make room for that as well. And I find that oftentimes, this is in general, not just specifically for men, but not every family or household has that privilege.
Yeah.
And then if you don't have that privilege, right, like you have to have time.
Yeah.
Right? You have to have the privilege of time to be able to make space and room for that, and to deal it and not feel like, no, I need to carry on and I can't let myself stop or break down because everything is resting. And I think that's also important to acknowledge. Not everyone has had the privilege of having two parents, or a parent who has enough time and space to be able to do that, right? Is not on this kind of survival mode, if you will.
Yeah. Vincent, do you have anything to add to this conversation? I mean, we've been talking, so I don't want to like.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's good. I think we're talking about stuff, so it's like if you have anything you want to add at all.
It's a great point. I don't think I have anything to add.
Okay. One thing I have a question from David in the comments that I'm going to put up because I think it's quite relevant. Not quite. It's incredibly relevant to what we're talking about. But I also want to just talk about the time thing really quickly. Even in terms of like time and money too, right? We talk about different levels of income, right? Like I would, if I had ever gone to my parents and said, I need to go to therapy, what? Yeah, good luck with that. First of all, growing up in the States, it's not even a possibility, just like in terms of income level that we were at. But like right now, you know, if my son were to come to me, not only do you need time to arrange that, but you need to find the money to arrange that. There's like all these different levels of like that of barriers that keep people from being able to work on their own emotional and mental health. This is related to this. I'm kind of trying to seg into here. It's a big question, so I'm going to read it and then I'm going to take it off the screen so we can actually talk without words on our face. So he says, David says, we seem to present as masculine, and I've heard from peers that seeking professional mental health support is difficult because the field is predominantly women, often white, and oftentimes women born to the privilege of wealth. Because of this, the people I've spoken to have difficulty feeling like their professional can relate to the sources of their mental struggles. Have you guys heard this from the people you work with? Since you seem to be breaking the traditional mold, how have you noticed people respond when they see their identity reflected back when they seek you out? There's a lot of questions here. I want Vincent to answer this first because you see things in the hospital. I have a ton of opinions about this, and so I want to give you the opportunity to speak because I'm sure Colin has a lot to say about it as well. So I want to make sure you've got a space to to say anything about it. If you want me to put it back up so you can read it, or
No, it's good. It's such a great point.
Yeah.
Very interesting question too, because it touches on how we design the services and who deliver the services and what that does to the accessibility of
Yeah.
mental health care and its reach. And it's true that a majority of mental health professionals are women.
Yeah.
So we kind of break the exception, although it's not that small of a minority. I would think perhaps in psychiatry, maybe a third of psychiatrists would be men, but I'm not sure of the exact numbers.
Yeah.
But also the way the system is designed also kind of fits better the feminine stereotype that we talked about, because it's really focused on depression and anxiety as the most common mental disorders.
Yeah.
But we know that they are more common in women rather than men, which is not to say that men have less mental health problems, but the way that we defined those common problems better matches the presentations and experiences that we find in women. And so, for example, the same kind of mental health problems can take the expression of substance use, for example,
Yeah.
or irritability rather than feeling sad.
Yeah.
And the system kind of facilitates talking about depression and anxiety. You can sit down and open up about these feelings during talk therapy. But for many men, talk therapy is not going to feel right, or it's not going to feel comfortable, maybe because of what we talked about of our cultural stance. So I think there are lots of resources out there for mental health. There are all kinds of approaches that are offered, but I think we still have a long way to go to better meet these needs. And one of the other questions was whether we felt that in our encounters with patients. I must say it's kind of difficult to tell. Because when I'm seeing a man, I don't know if he would have responded differently if I had been a woman. But I think it is. I do have the impression that men may be a bit more comfortable sometimes, but it depends of everybody's individual experience, I think.
Okay. I think that's a great intro to this. Con, do you have any opinions on this? I can put the question back up if you want me to.
I just actually read through it.
You read through it, okay.
It's an excellent question.
Yeah.
I think for maybe obvious or not so obvious reasons, my experience has been a little bit different from Vincent's, but I do agree with what Vincent said. Like that, I think that was, I've never heard it communicated or articulated that way. So thank you, Vincent. That was actually really informative. I agree with the statement though, that at least what I've seen is like my psychology undergrad class at McGill was 550 kids, and I was maybe one of 15 or 20 males.
Yeah.
Like it is predominantly, at least here, predominantly run or kind of occupied by white privileged women. And I think that it's twofold. And on the one hand, I think that if you're looking in terms of identifying with your therapist, right, there's different facets or ways in which you can identify. What I've noticed is that when I started my work, 90% of my client base or more was white. And then the George Floyd murder happened, and that kind of just opened things up where people couldn't suppress anymore and created an awareness. And then after 3 months, my client base more or less tripled and became about 95% black. There are a lot of people I know, at least for racialized, who are unwilling to go towards mental health services because of the fact that they know the chances are you're not going to find somebody who looks like you. And the importance of that is some people don't understand because you might constitute the majority and you walk around where almost everybody looks like you, and it's something you have to worry about. But I know for a lot of people there's a barrier because they're concerned of, one, how their own level of comfort and ability to identify and open up and feel safe in that room, which is paramount to therapy and that therapeutic relationship. But also as well, I think we can all understand as human beings how when you're struggling with something or going through difficulty, how powerful it is to have somebody validate your experience and your emotions and your existence, and how damaging it is to be invalidated. And a lot of times when you go to see a therapist, like we said, it's predominantly run by white privileged women, and there's nothing wrong with that group, but it's oftentimes a group of people who don't necessarily have significant or any experience at all with your culture or your demographic or the population you represent. And so the extra bandwidth or toll or energy that it takes to have to explain far more than the average person needs to in therapy, and then the uncertainty, the anxiety, the stress of not knowing how they're ever going to interpret it, if they're going to really understand it or just see you for the way the media and stereotypes and society labels you and stigmatizes you. That's a lot, and that's not conducive to opening up and feeling safe and being vulnerable. So it does serve, it definitely serves as a barrier in people feeling comfortable to do that. And it is a huge issue. Like, I'll give you an example. To date, as far as I know, I am one of 2 black male Anglophone therapists in all of Montreal, and we're actually wondering of all of the province of Quebec.
Yeah.
So, and what that also means is that the mental health professional is going to be overloaded because there's no other options. So that definitely resonates. When it comes to gender more in terms of men or women, that's interesting because my client base is also significantly increased in terms of men, and men being willing and realizing the importance to have a safe space to talk. And I think what they actually appreciate is the fact that, in the same way they said the importance of modeling, it's like, I think it's for them, it's like this sense, like almost like an ideal best friendship where you feel safe, you feel cool, there's a little bit of a camaraderie or broship, but at the same time, like, that person is also modeling that you can be that and still be completely vulnerable and emotional and have a language around it, and it doesn't change anything. And I think there's a power there. I don't think it affects men so much of going towards therapy because I think we're also just so normalized to women being the most nurturing or the receptacle for that emotions and vulnerability. So I think I see it a little bit more towards like racial or ethnic or maybe cultural or religious identity, a bit more as a barrier. But I think it can work both ways as well, and I hope that answered your question.
Yeah. I think you both have given like really great insight into this. I think, Vincent, I really like that you brought the whole how the system is designed to treat depression and anxiety, and even how people express those emotions around depression and anxiety, and how there's masculine ways and feminine ways, and the system is more designed towards the feminine ways. And I'm using these words very loosely here. Please take that into consideration. So I have a lot of opinions about this, and so I have been in and out of different therapy for various reasons. Mostly, the reason I've never really stuck with it is financial, to be honest. It's like not something that I've been able to like prioritize in my life, or felt that I needed to prioritize. I'm sure we could dig into that for hours, but that's not what we're here for. That being said, I think that throughout over the past like probably decade, I've seen I think 4 or 5 different therapists. So it's not that many. However, only one was a man, and none of them were visible minorities at all. And so the last time I tried to go into therapy, I came with a list. I was like, these are things that I'm having a hard time with right now. And we can talk about, what you feel comfortable with, because I don't want to go into a session and start a relationship with someone where they're A, not capable of supporting me with this topic, or B, just uncomfortable supporting me with this topic. And I think that I'm like, in going into it with that mindset, I was like already kind of a step ahead, maybe, I don't know, because I knew what I wanted to talk about, not just that I was like, this is like, I'm having a hard time, which is a fair thing to go in and not knowing what you need to say. But one of the main things that I was having a difficult time with at the time was being an immigrant, being a person of color, and walking around and growing up in a place where I went to school. I lived with minority white people. And now being here in Canada where I'm 100% in the minority, and like even a minority of a minority, right? Like I'm an immigrant Latino, like we're not that many. So like, and that was just a topic that the white man that I was seeing, we couldn't really get into it. Because for a million reasons, and there were other things that were more important. But I wonder, if the options of like who is available in terms of like therapists, if that would have been something I could have even addressed. And this is through, like different things. And I think, Con, you bring up a really important point in that you said you're one of two black therapists, and in the order Anglo male, Anglo male. Well, I think in the order of psychologists, last time I checked, there were 3 black members of the order that were psychologists, 3 in all of Quebec. So like, come on, like there's more than that. I don't even know about percentages, but there's more than 3 can handle in terms of like psychologists, right? In terms of like seeing someone that maybe looks something close to what you want to, like you're used to in your family or friends in front of you. And I think that makes a huge difference in terms of like being able to access, in terms of accessibility, just flat out. Anyways, all right, so there's a couple comments, and I think that I want to put them on the screen because I want to make sure everyone gets to a chance to be heard here. So these are coming from a bit further back here. Cedric is saying that the professionals he reaches out to for his bipolar disorder are often women, and that makes it harder for him to establish a connection. I can't even talk about it freely to my friends, especially male friends. They easily get fed up, or I'll just end up like a burden that most of the time I choose to keep things to myself. I mean, I think that's... sadly, I feel like that's a pretty common experience when men try to talk to other men about different emotional things. And I think then David said, you pay for an hour of time, not an hour's worth of therapy. And I'm pretty sure that was a comment to having to explain a scenario that Colin was talking about. It's like, okay, well, this is where I'm coming from. Whereas, if like you're talking to someone who like, I'll give an example. Right, I've been in Montreal for 18 years. When I first moved to Montreal, my skin was a lot darker. I was in the sun all the time. I was like, I was visibly not white. Like I can pass now because I've been in Montreal for so long. I don't have sun. I'm pass depending on who I'm with. That being said, I've brought this question up with a number of friends, and I'm a Latino man, and in Montreal, I've been held at gunpoint by the police more than 6 times in 20 years. And so my question is always to my friends, has that ever happened to you? And they're like, no, never. Never has it happened. And I'm just like, okay, cool. So like my realities are very different. And so how do I go to a therapist who has maybe never even experienced this, doesn't know how to handle that, doesn't know anything about it? How are they going to manage that? How are they going to help support me through this, right? And so this is like, that's just one example of like a scenario that like, yeah, I've been on my knees in the snow with 5 cops pointing their guns at me. It sucks. And like, I go back to my friends and I tell them, this just happened 10 minutes ago. And they go, haha, that's terrible. Oh, yeah. Great. That was the extent of the support that I got for that. And it sucks. That's it,
It's I think it's because like those, like, and I know what it's like too as well. Like you go to a friend and you just realize like they exist. They not only come from, they exist in a different reality. And I often explain that to my clients. It's like you and I do not live in the same reality. We don't experience this reality the same way. Yeah. And I think the problem is that there's so many levels to it. Whether it's all the way into the culture of is mental health stigmatized, and then from that you're not going to see people moving in those directions professionally. Like I've never had a black mental health professional ever guide me or motivate me or guide me. I've never had a black educator, and I finished a master's, right? Like, and I think what happens is that, so it goes through the levels, but, and to speak on what Vincent said, the system isn't designed to allow for a variety or a rich diversity
Yeah.
of mental health professionals. It is a privilege to have the access to resources to go to university and to pursue that degree, and then to go to grad school where you oftentimes can't work full time throughout that, which means you have to come from a background or so that allows it. Some people have definitely worked through it, and more power to them, but it isn't the easiest. That's not conducive to you doing the best.
No.
And so essentially what that does is you take the general society and you just funnel it down
Yeah.
to a certain subsect that has no understanding whatsoever, not even vicariously through like close friends or relationships, to understand the most impactful, traumatic, triggering, identity building experiences of your lives.
Yeah.
Of course you're not going to feel comfortable in opening up.
Yeah.
And I've had the experiences as well where people of color or black people, and they mention it, I was like, oh yeah, for sure. And like we'll joke and we'll talk and we'll laugh. It's just like, yeah, definitely. And like, and we relate, and you can tell in the room there's an energy and a power. Anyone can experience this when there's something that you really get and relatable, and like that person identifies you. You don't have to be of any color to understand that.
Yeah.
But then we also understand how incredibly significant it is, right? Like, and it's such a conduit to whether or not everything else is going to flow. And the problem is, like, it's not designed to have certain types of people be in mental health be mental health professionals in those positions.
Yeah.
And then that's a problem because it perpetuates the problem where people are like, this isn't the solution, and this might just add or increase the damage or the trauma or the pain that I'm already experiencing. This might further put me down that hole or spiral, make me feel pessimistic, because it's another experience where I realize that the society or the world that I'm living in is not built, designed, or meant for me.
Yeah. I kind of, man, I have so much to say. I'm going to give another like life example, and it's related to like men's mental health, and it's kind of directly related to what you're saying about how you have to funnel it funnels down in terms of higher education, in terms of like, you know, you don't have people of color and you don't have men going into mental health fields, and it's like these like sorry guys, emergency alert. And so I'm going to give you an example. Like I've done a master's degree, and I had to work full time through that master's. I was not, and I'm applying again for another master's program where I'm going to also have to work full time through this other master's degree. And every time I've talked to people about it, they're like, you can't do that. And I'm like, I don't have a choice. That's not my, like, I have a kid. I have bills to pay. I don't have anyone supporting me. I'm almost 40. No one's going to pay for my master's degree for me. Sorry. That's not going to happen. That being said, I want to give a story of something that, you know, I'm sure everyone has seen the videos of hopefully everyone has seen it. These like all these kids standing in a field, and it's an exercise where people talk about privilege. And it's like, oh, you're in it. If this situation pertains to you, take a step forward. And if this situation pertains to you, take a step back. And it's an exercise that happens, which honestly is like so problematic in so many different ways. But I was in one of these exercises during one of my classes in my master's program. And so we're sitting in a gym, and we start this exercise, and all these questions start coming forward. And I keep taking steps back until I'm at the wall. I literally cannot take any more steps back. And there's other people in the class who are almost at the other side of the gym. And it's just like, okay, cool. So we did that exercise, but meanwhile, I don't get to process how that feels, right? I don't get to like be the one who says, well, I don't get to like go through that. Like it's traumatic, I guess you could say, right? It's like, okay, cool. So I have to sit here and out every single I don't even know how to call it, but just like I have to go through this of being like, yeah, this is what's wrong. This thing is bad. This thing is bad. Oh, I got to take a step forward. Awesome. But like, it's just, so anyone who's doing that exercise, don't. That's my takeaway for this. Just don't do that exercise, please. It's not cool. I'm like totally digressing from the men's mental health topic here. I'm sorry. We're going to be wrapping this up in a minute here. I have a couple questions, and I think this is a relevant one. David is asking.
I'll be right back. Let's go to the watchroom.
Go for it. Yeah, go for it. So David is asking, when you share trauma with male peers, do you encounter humor defensively? I can answer this, but I want Vincent to give you to give me your opinion. Have you ever, like, in your life experience, have you like seen this happening, or even in your professional experience, have you seen this, like, where even when people are presenting their
Yes.
trauma, they start by like laughing about it?
Yes, I do see that a lot, both in my practice, but also in my own group of friends. When people are going through very difficult situations, whether that's trauma or other kinds of hardships, it's true that we see a lot of people reacting by humor, which can be defensive. It's also sometimes it can be a healthy way of coping. It kind of makes things a bit more bearable and
Yeah.
might facilitate opening up. But it's true that sometimes it can be sort of a barrier.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of a friend who might make a joke and then expect the conversation to be over,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Exactly.
you're left wondering, should I insist or
Yeah.
it. So it's true. It is a reaction that we see.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I mean, I know I do, but I'm sure a lot of other men use humor defensively. Like, I laugh at, I remember sitting in therapy one time, and the therapist was like, okay, so you're laughing while you're saying this, like, why? And I'm like, that's just what I do. Like, I don't know why I do it. I don't know if it's a defense mechanism. I don't know if it's just how I cope. I think what you're saying is it's a coping mechanism, right? It's like, we're not laughing in the like, haha, it's funny. We're laughing in the like, well, I have to deal with it, and that's just how it is. And so it's like, like, maybe it's nervous laughter. I don't really know, but yeah, I have definitely 100% experienced it, and I've been on the other side of it too, where that's like how I cope, and that's how I think. Is it healthy or not? I don't know. I think that if we have other methods and other ways of coping, then it's okay if we're using humor as part of a bigger picture. I think if it's the only way we're using it, it can be problematic for the reasons that Vincent said, right? It's like, okay, so you're laughing, but I can't tell if this is serious or not, right? I don't know if I should be responding, if I should be, doing any more for you here. Con, this is the question we're talking about here. So, I think I'll give an example, another example of someone, where a man was talking about, he's so depressed, he can't get out of bed, he can't go to work, but he's literally laughing the entire time he's doing it. And it's like, well, I don't know if you're saying that because you want help, if you just want to vent, I don't know how serious this situation is, right? And I think so that's an important factor. Con, do you have any insight into this?
So the question on the screen?
Yeah.
So sharing trauma and then the response that you get from
it's like people like trying
humor?
to joke it off or like laugh it off or like, I guess, yeah, any way of humor.
At times, and I
Yeah.
think sometimes that might be because we ourselves as men don't necessarily, we don't provide like a richness of detail when we're always disclosing, right? Like sometimes we put it out in a way that's somewhat cautious or safe because we don't know
Yeah.
how people are going to respond, or in particular because it's men and we either have lived experiences or the assumptions that they may not respond in an appropriate way, or they might respond in a damaging way, right? So I think there is like definitely there's that, and I think you also experience it on the other end because sometimes that humor, like I said, like humor defensively. Sometimes people don't know what to do with that, and the easiest thing to do, or like the like small list of acceptable male emotions, anger, maybe some confusion, and humor is universal, right? So like they're like, okay, let me find the language that I'm allowed to
I've got three responses to this: laugh, angry, or stern.
And so yes, like it is like you do, like I have like experienced this myself or like heard of this. I think it is common, and I think it might be on both ends, not like in terms of blame or criticism, just more how are we delivering it and how are we allowing our audience to understand that this actually maybe isn't something that in the past I've normally kind of put out there and it isn't that serious, or like I brushed off. Like how do I convey it in a manner to show that like no, this is on some next level type stuff. This is very different. This isn't apart from how I normally am or what I'm disclosing or what we talk about. sometimes you just have to frame it that way. Like,
Yeah.
yo, like I actually got to tell you something serious.
Yeah.
And then I think that can set the tone for someone knowing how to respond. They might not fully know what to say, but they might own it and say, man, like, that sucks, or that's hard, or I don't even know what to say to that. But at least it's more appropriate. It's more in line. It's more reflective of the fact that, like, this human being has heard and received what it is that you said, even if they might not be capable to give you, like, this lengthy soliloquy in terms of advice or support. It's unfortunate, but yeah, and I think it's not. Oftentimes, it's not for lack of desire. It's more for the lack of ability or comfort.
Yeah, I think that's I think you make a good point about, like, when we want to talk about things, we have to be clear about how we're approaching it, right? It's like, this is serious. Sometimes it has to be that blunt. I'm not good at reading between the lines. So if you tell me, you say something, I might most likely respond with humor because that's just my general personality. But if you say, this is serious, I'm like, okay, I have to put, like, we're talking about something now. This isn't just like someone, like, saying something for the sake of, like, just getting it off their chest. So we're almost done here. I want to put this on the screen because I think it's giving a nice little glimmer of hope here, and I think it's important to acknowledge. She's saying she's a Latina art therapist, recent comer to Montreal. I can never pronounce it right, so I try not to butcher it. So through the CCPA, which is I think it's the Canadian Counselors. I can't remember exactly the exact. I'm going to look it up while I'm typing here. There's a chapter of creative arts therapists and counselors of color, and there's and it's small, but there are a few. And if there's any other networks you can connect with, because they'd love to refer men that come to the practice, since I really acknowledge this particular challenge for men to reach out to a therapist and bump into another a woman. So I know that there is the Lavender Collective, and they are. I don't know how updated that is, but they have been. They've been updating their website with people of color that are doing it, and then there's also the Black Healing Fund, which is popular on Instagram as well. And so they have a page where you can look up therapists, and I'll put these in the comments at the end after this. I don't have them listed right off the top of my head, but those are the two that immediately come to mind: is the Lavender Collective and the Black Healing Collective is the name of it, I believe. And they both have websites.
I just put something in the chat. I don't know how up to date it is, but it's the Montreal Black Therapist Resource List.
Okay.
And that's also something that it could be. There are going to be a little bit of overlap across these lists, but that's also something as well that might be helpful. Again, this is far more for, like, Black or BIPOC lists.
Yeah.
But, like, you'll be able to find, like, that's gonna be your best bet to find men as well. Yeah. Or I know some people found me just by Google search. Psychology Today. Psychology Today is an excellent source across Canada as well.
Okay.
And a lot of my clients find me there.
Perfect. Vincent, do you have any resources that you can think of for? I think it's good to end it on this note, actually. It's like good resources for men to find if they want to find other men who are able to help them in some capacity.
I can't think of any other resource. I'm sorry.
Okay, no, that's fine. It's hard. There's not much, right? So it's like I am gonna put in the comments here. The AMI-Quebec has a page specifically for men's resources, so we have a page for that, and I put it in the comments there. And David's saying, I gotta find that garage one day. I'm working on it, David. It's gonna happen. I rent it's funny because I rent a little space where, unsurprisingly, it's all men, where we all work on our own motorcycles and stuff. And I always invite people to come in and work on their projects, and I find that it's like a really great way to just like get people talking. And I invite people to come like have a beer, and that tends to like pull people out of their shell, especially now during pandemic times where it's just like we're not getting to see each other. This is like a quiet, safe space. Like we're not, it's not a ton of people coming in and out. So it's good. It's like a way of like I try to like build community in that sense. and it's an important aspect of things. Colin and Vincent, thank you so much for joining me. I really, really appreciate it. Do either of you do you have any like parting words that you had like to give? I'm gonna let Vincent go first because you've been going first. So do you have any like parting words?
Well, I just thank you, AMI-Quebec, for organizing this. I think it's part of the work that we have to do as a society is to have these kind of meetings. And thank you also to those who came and who asked questions. That's really appreciated.
Perfect. Thank you. Colin, do you have any parting words?
Same. Thank you to both of you, Vincent and Tony, and thank you for allowing me to be a part of this. Outside of parting words, I guess if we're talking about men's mental health, I think it's a lot of what we repeated that I think there's a lot of power while we need bigger scale changes just in terms of how we as men can model like the need for vulnerability and the space for that as well. And sometimes like us being willing to do that, which isn't always easy, will speak to somebody and resonate with them and allow them to feel the same type of freedom. And then I think also for women or those who identify as such, it's also understanding sometimes what men maybe go through and also facilitating and allowing to create that space for and letting them know that it's okay or that it's not a challenge to your masculinity or manhood to open up and be vulnerable.
Yeah. So I'm putting the comments that people are saying. Thank you everyone so much for like participating in this, both Vincent and Con, and then also the people who are participating and watching and asking questions. I really appreciate it. As far as parting words, I'm just gonna say, don't be afraid to ask your friends like how they're doing, and like actually ask them, not just like how you doing. Oh, I'm good. All right, cool. What's up? Like, I'll give you some like ways of doing that. Is like ask them. All right, well, what's going on that's good right now? Like, right? What's going on that's bad right now? Or why are you just fine? What could you do to be better? And if you're looking at a way to talk to your friends, like I said, distract yourselves. Do something else. And then start talking about stuff. So that way you're not just focused on that. It may seem like it's like cheating or whatever, but like, nah, that's going to get you talking, right? Like, go bake cookies, go running, go jogging, go for a walk, go work on a project together, drive in your car, play video games, whatever it is that you have a way of like connecting with your friends, use that as an opportunity to talk. Because you'll be surprised, like people will talk way more on the bench seat of a car than they will sitting on a couch. I don't know what it is. Bench seats of cars get people talking about everything and anything. So buy an old car and get a bench seat. That's my parting words. It's the only way. Thank you, Vincent and Con. And thank you again, everyone, for joining us. And join us next month when we talk about women's mental health. Check our Facebook page. All of that is there. And I'll be posting more links at the end. Bye, and thank you.